Okay, so for the second half of the tutorial, I just have to backtrack a little bit because I ran into some issues, and it might be my system specifically. But when or if I don't set this path, then it doesn't actually render. It doesn't actually render this node. And then obviously also if you click compositing, it's going to still save whatever is set here, or it's going to save this node in the format that's set here. And again, I might be mistaken. Of course, when I render, sometimes I have to come back here, see, test, and iterate. So I expect you would have to do the same. Okay, so I think in the previous one, render out some tests. Just going to trash this that says test for now, so that we can do a few more. Still going to call it test over here. But so that's in the test folder, and that's fine. That should replicate whatever was happening there, but I'm going to just copy and paste it in here. And so I'm going to be a little bit sneaky, and then instead of having all of this checked on in the preview over here, I'm going to include the composite, or the composite rather, of the compositing, whatever is happening in here. I'm going to rely on this to export the EXRs, and I saw that you get a add-on that automatically generates all the outputs for you. If you were inclined that way, you could also add that Python script that would automatically generate this for you. But I mean, it doesn't take that long, so it's not that. I guess if you're exporting all your layers, then it might be problematic, but for this it's fine. And then in this one, I'm going to actually change this just to JPEGs, so that this actually becomes my preview. And I still don't want to overwrite to be on for this. This is then my preview render, because this is going to be whatever this node is doing. And then this, I'm hoping would just save out, because I'm already saving something out. So like I said previously, when I did this and I didn't have anything in here, this wouldn't save, even if that was set. Something about permissions, maybe it's a Mac thing, maybe it's just not how it works, but okay. All right, so when I render test this, I should get some JPEGs from over here, and my multi-layer EXRs half float. I mean, Pixar 24, I think it's referring to 24-bit color. So it's, I mean, you're not forced to use it. You can also use zip, although it needs to be, it still needs to be lossy. Otherwise, it's not. Smaller. We can check what file size that is, but like I said, I prefer the Pixar one. Let's do a quick render again, and then I'll show you how I comp this. And again, it's all about figuring out what you have in your scene that you need to separate afterwards, or what you could use from the elements in your scene, like an emission pass or a bloom pass. They won't make any sense if you have no bloom and no emission in your scene. Common ones that I've pointed out before is your image, your alpha, your depth, certain mats, ambient occlusion. Technically, I don't even have ambient occlusion here. I don't know if let me see if I can. Don't think Eevee allows you to split the ambient occlusion. Oh, there it is. Sorry, my bad. So I'll just add that to this. Okay, so that should be everything now, and I'm just going to set this frame range to be something a bit smaller, something that's where something's happening. It's quite wild. Let's do this last bit. I like that. Okay, so from 466. That should probably do the trick. Okay, so we've got some, and then let's go ahead and render. Now previously it gave an error here saying that it couldn't save, and then let's just quickly also have a look at what is being saved. Oh, and this is another thing that I picked up afterwards, compositing. when you're saving out depth or a depth pass, it's a little bit stupid to go and add additional depth of field blur on top of your footage, because you're actually going to use that depth to create that effect. So it's a bit of a double up. I do want to replace those. I'm actually going to overwrite them, and then I'm just going to go ahead and, because I've got my depth pass, I'm going to go ahead and switch off the depth of field on the camera. Actually, I do need that. How do I avoid having that render out? You still want the depth to be set according to the depth of field. I'm just wondering how I would split the two, because you still want that to be tracked. I'm not entirely sure how to solve that, but this doesn't seem like the right thing to do when I'm going to use my depth, when I'm going to apply my depth in post. Then I don't want it to be part of my frame, so I'm just going to go ahead, render it without it for now, and see if I can create that. Okay, so there aren't that many frames. It takes about 8 seconds a frame, so I should have that ready in a jiffy. Then when we're back in After Effects, I've got a couple of things in here already, but I'll show you how to import that. So just give me a second. Okay, so I started a new project just to make it easier to understand what actually transpires. So let's grab that file. Project, renders, test, select the EXR, footage, find, create composition, open EXR sequence, all good. Okay, so After Effects does this import options thing that you should have everything checked, because you want the pre-composed layers, you want the context sheet, and you want the composition. And it applies the extractor effect to all these layers. Now, one thing that is, however, very important to note before you import everything is to make sure that your After Effects settings, import settings, are proper. Otherwise, you're going to have to change all of your pre-comps and everything to 24 frames per second. Make sure that that matches whatever you've rendered out, okay? So once that's fine, then all of the imports, compositions will be fine. If you do it afterwards, you're going to have to go into that composition settings and change it back to 24 for everything. And then also adjust your main EXR sequence and all of the pre-comps that it created. So it is really beneficial to do that beforehand. So what's great about this is it creates the context sheet, which is essentially all of your layers all put together. Now, technically, this is what I want to see, but these compositions are typically rather large. So this is a 4K, almost 4 by 4K square, depending on how many channels you've rendered, and in your case, you might even have more. So I wouldn't recommend doing it or just outputting this. If you want to, it's not as professional in terms of presentation, but for pre-comp and testing, if you're going to be doing or redoing this at some point, it's okay just to show whatever you've rendered so that we can try and make some sense of it, but we do want to see how everything fits together. You can see that that's then the emission, that's the depth. The depth needs to be treated so that we can actually see whether the depth is working or not. In that instance, we are going to have to probably duplicate some of these, like the depth that we want to show is different from the depth that we can perceive. So over here we don't see the full glory of the depth, even though the depth is technically working. Something that doesn't seem to be working is the alpha, however. So let me just quickly check. I don't think, and it's probably my fault if I go back to the Blender file. I think I should have checked transparency, then I would have had a proper alpha. So that's good that I can pick that up. You can see that some of your passes aren't working, so you probably have to go back and then fix those in the context sheet, or you can see it in the context sheet, but you have to fix those. Okay, so then for the layers that don't present well on their own, but you still have to present exactly what they're doing, and for us to know that they're actually working. If we refer back to the, excuse me, I'm hopping around, the assignment, sorry, not the brief, but I think they're both in here. So those are the passes. You need to indicate how these passes work, because we don't know for sure. We don't have access to the render files themselves. You need to illustrate that you know how they work together, and what information you've extracted from Blender for the render and for the compositor to use in the end. So that's the test, that's the assessment. You need to show that you're able to aggregate all the information that's required for the composition, and you're also able to identify needs, shortcomings, and errors that you need to fix afterwards. That's essentially what needs to happen over here. Okay, so we've got an alpha that's not working, so I'll re-render that, but for now I'm just going to ignore it. In our contact sheet, we want depth to show up proper. So I would actually, in this instance, duplicate the depth pass, because you're going to use it for depth at some point, actual depth, and then you need the entire spectrum. But for illustrative purposes, you're going to need to go into the EXR and change the depth to something that maps it to RGB. So 250, setting the white point to 255. I think when it's less, then it doesn't really show up. So now we can sort of perceive the depth. You could probably tone this down if you feel like that's too much. You'd be able to see depth in there, or you should be able to see like a gradient. So you can go and tweak this. Obviously it can't be less than 1, but there you can see. Sometimes I use this as a matte, but you shouldn't, because this is an ongoing color gradient. What you're doing by compressing the color is you're just squashing the black and white contrast. So you'll find that there's no anti-aliasing, because it couldn't occur in this instance, because you're crushing the colors like this. So this is not a very good alpha. And I have actually, in this instance, used it as an alpha, so most of my renders look quite jagged. But sometimes you need to do whatever you can in that instance, and yeah, time limitations are real. Okay, so I duplicated my depth source so that I can showcase that. If you want to replace any of the stuff in your contact sheet, you could of course do that by simply selecting it in here and there and dragging it across, holding down your Alt key and dropping it in, and it'll replace it wherever it is. So this is a better contact sheet. This one's also not very obvious what it is. You may want to, in some instances, also explain what it is for your submission. So you might have to, and also you can't export this format because it's not going to work with your compression or anything like that. So what you're going to want to do is create more compositions for showing whatever this is. But actually, you can show this. Like I said, this is the cheap way of doing it. Just sort of pre-comp, or taking your compositions, laying them out in a grid and showing them all together like this in a square. That saves a little bit of time, because now you don't have to animate masks or anything like that. But another way of doing it is to take this assembled composition. So that what's happened here is they've put all the layers in a sort of a best guess order. And they're all playing on top of each other. So this is ideal for masking one layer after another. So what I would recommend is creating some solids. So Control Y, Control Y should create a solid if you have the comp selected. And then you want to create a black and white layer. This is what a mask or a pre-comp. This is one way of doing it manually, at least. So I can show you real quick. So we've got a white solid, and then we that's been added, but we don't really need it there. But in any case, and then we do the same, and we create a black solid. So we've got black and white, and then black and white in a pre-comp, which is Control-Shift-C creates a pre-comp. Obviously, all of these things are also in the menus under composition. You can say pre-composition, and then you can call this your mask. So then we create one mask that we can use for everything. And then in this instance, if we go into mask, then you can just decide on when this needs to occur. Normally, since Okay, this is the duration of the shot, but normally you want this to happen quite early on. So what we're going to do is I'm going to be a real lazy person here. Uh, you would have masked it out, but I am going to literally just animate the two. So take this position from here to, let's say, we want these things to pass quite quickly, so let's say 12 frames. And I'm just going to animate this away. Okay, there you go. And we actually probably wanted to go the other way, so I'm just going to do that in the opposite direction. Sorry. It reads better. And it's not angled or anything. It would be nice if you could spend a little bit of time making this pretty, because it's probably going to end up in your portfolio, but it's not a requirement for the pre-comps, at least. This is just to illustrate. Okay, so then we have our assembled component here. Sorry, there it is with our mask now, but we also want one without a mask. So I'm going to actually just remove that mask pre-comp. I'm going to take this assembled, I'm going to duplicate that so that it's assembled too, and I'm going to change assembled here to showcase. And then I'm going to work in the showcase with the mask that I've just created. So there's my mask comp, put it over here. You can see that that's working. Okay, but then you need to tell each layer that's what it needs to use for its matte. And you're going to need to duplicate these across the board. Put that over there, there, there. They don't actually need to be in those positions, but this is just where, well, not anymore, at least with the update. This just makes sense. So I'm going to tell that to use the mask. Tell that to use that mask, and you want these, they're not alpha, so they're just Luma mats. So just make sure that you use those. That one, use the mask above it, so bloom that mask. Wait, how did I? Yeah, again, not that, not that, not that. They don't need to be there. This one, the mask above it, so it's weird. Let me just see if I click the top mask, so that's a mistake. Let me just do it proper. Mask, the one above it, and depth, mask, the one above it, emit, mask, the one above it. Okay, so now all of these are masked according to Luma of the one underneath it, and then you can, of course, you could move those so that this one will play. Okay, it's masking everything underneath it, so it's a bit confusing at the moment. Let's move that back. Let's see. Currently it is, let me just check this mask. It is active until it is not. But if you invert this, then it will reveal the underlying layer. So here we see nothing until everything is revealed. Okay, so all you want to do is just make sure that this mask is moved to a position where it makes sense, where you can show what it is. Okay, so we could offset these. I mean, there is an easy way of just selecting all the layers and then think right click, what is it? Keyframe assistant. You can say sequence layers, and you can tell them how much time they need to put in between them, or if they should just be one after the other. Okay, so that sequences them, but then you're gonna have to make them shorter. So let's say we want to see the reveal for about 4 seconds, and then it needs to go away. So what we need to do is make all our masks. Okay, we don't have 4 seconds of footage, so let's make it same 12 frames, or a second in this case. So I'm just gonna chop all of them. Control Shift D splits them, and I'm just gonna delete them, and then grab, right click, sequence, and that should be fine. Okay, so we're running out of composition time here again, but now we should see, what are we seeing here? Still seeing the emission layer, which is not really what I want. Don't think I need to invert them actually. Okay, so now we're seeing the bottom one, ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion masks out. It's not working properly. Wait, what was that? No, actually it might be working properly. It's just that this alpha isn't working. Okay. I'm going to delete the layer that's not working for now, and just go through that process again of layering my masks, or sequencing my masks, because it was a bit of a curveball. Sorry, where was I? Keyframe system sequence. Yes. So now we see this ambient occlusion masked out. There should technically be something underneath it. So like maybe we should take, also there should be some logic to your order here, but let's do the whole assembled one. Let's just do that. So this is my, and I did it in the assembled comp. I did it in the wrong comp. It should be the showcase comp, not the assembled comp. Okay, so I'm just, whatever that is, it's just flip for now. I can change the names later, but I'm going to take the showcase then and put it at the bottom so that we have a full render that we can kind of cut away from and reveal underneath it. So the showcase then, it's a different composition, but this is the one where everything needs to be in the correct order. So emission needs to be most likely lighten, additive, or screened. In this case, I'm just going to say lighten. Then, actually normally, I would do lighten, sure, but I would also do like a glow effect, because it's emission, we want it to glow, so we can go generate glow. Where is glow? Is it under generate? Stylize maybe? Glow. Okay. Alright, so not seeing it currently. It's just maybe the threshold is just not enough. So reduce the threshold, then we start seeing a glow on the emission, and you can obviously increase the intensity and the radius. So it looks good. Okay, so that's maybe a bit much, but okay, serves the purpose. Okay, so that would be lighten. Then we have depth. In this instance, to use depth, we'll go and add an adjustment layer. So new adjustment layer. For the adjustment layer, we need an effect called camera lens blur, and then you need to say what that camera lens blur is actually referencing. So the layer below it would be depth, and then you need to set the blur distance of the depth. So that will vary, well, that will depend on where you want the depth to be. You need the color layer to reference this, and I would put this on top so that the emission also is included in the depth layer. But for now, we don't need to see it. It's already doing what it needs to do because of the adjustment layer. That is essentially our depth of field, and we can just hide this depth of field layer for now until we figure out where the depth needs to be. Then the color, this is our main layer, of course. You can see that it is currently out of focus, so we need to change our depth of field. And you can see there it starts becoming in focus, so that's kind of our focal point. This might seem quite arbitrary because we're working with a very linear color spectrum, or a large color spectrum rather. Yeah, that seems to think that it's around about, it caps at about, what is it, 32,000, but that seems to be almost fully in focus. Some other things are a little bit out of focus. That seems to work. You can also, of course, invert it, and then you're going to have to work in the lower tier, lower end of the focal distance. But that's fine. Whatever you decide. Color, I would actually put at the bottom. Ambient occlusion gets multiplied on top of that. Right, so now we've got a little bit of that going on. You can just check what that's actually doing. Okay, so our ambient occlusion is sort of cutting into some aspects of our model. It's chopping off some bits, and it's also quite heavy. It's like it's intense. So what I would normally do with ambient occlusion is tint it to be the color of the ambient color in the scene, which in this case is a little bit more of a bluish kind of color. So I would go color correction and tint, and then I would say map the white colors to, well, white can probably stay white, but oops, not black. And our black will be a little bit more bluish. Okay, so now our ambient occlusion on its own looks more like that, but it doesn't have an alpha, so we're actually in need of an alpha, which is why I said that this depth is not the right way of doing depth, but it is an effective substitute for an alpha map. So what I would do in this case then is say use that depth source as the alpha map for the ambient occlusion. Yeah, my ambient occlusion's not doing a great job here. It's kind of it's causing a lot of issues. For some reason it's smaller, so I don't know why that is. Yeah, I'm not too thrilled about that. I don't think it's adding anything that's making the scene necessarily better. So in this instance, I'm actually going to leave it out. Alpha not working. Bloom should work. Okay, so that's let me just switch these off as well. Bloom, very little bloom in here. There's a little bit over here, but fine. I'm just going to use that as a additive. You should see a little bit of that over there. And of course, if you want something to be more intense, I could also go and take the glow that I've gotten from the submission, put that on a bloom with low threshold, and we should actually, then we're sort of enhancing our bloom over there. Okay, so yeah, you can add glows, or you could color grade that, of course. You could add multiple layers of it, but that seems to do the trick. And what else do we need here? Okay, we've switched off our emissions, and the emission looks better again. And we've got an alpha. We've used our depths. I think we've used pretty much everything. It's a pity the ambient occlusion isn't doing really what we wanted to. Yeah, it's weird that it's created this edge like that. And it's creating some artifacts. So obviously this layer is not, it's not particularly useful for the comp. We might want ambient occlusion again later on. We could, I guess, figure out some way of changing this depth or shrinking this depth. We could potentially try things under keying, like inner outer key, to try and thin out the edges. This doesn't seem to do anything though. Background outside, foreground inside. Yeah, no, there's no actual keying happening, so it might be tricky to, like, if you, no, this gets tricky, because now I can once again create a pre-composition of this, and then I can call this like fix AO, and then we can try in here go and still say, okay, that needs to use the depth source. That's my ambient occlusion. That's what the depth looks like, and you can check that. Okay, that's my alpha then. Weird that it makes this edge. I want to like shrink this so that that goes away. So then I could go back here. This can go back to multiply, and then I could probably try the effect for keying, because it does actually have alpha now. So I can say inner outer key. And edge thinning should do the trick. Now you can see that it's eating into that matte, and I could feather that a little bit. So now I still have ambient occlusion in certain areas, and it's actually creating this artificial rim light because of this edge thinning. And then sometimes it's too much, because it gets really, really black. So can even turn it down to like a 30%. And I mean, there's a point where it's sort of negligible, but you can see how it's separating certain elements. Okay, so that's what the actual comp would look like. And then the pre-comp, because we're just testing our layers, doesn't mean that you have to get this all the way right. We could obviously still work on these. We just need to make sure that we have the layers that we want in working order. Okay, so that's doing its thing. And then once that's working, we can go back to our assembly, which I think it's over here. So now we've got our main comp in the background. We show our ambient occlusion. We show our, what was that? Bloom, that was so weak. Let me just see. if something like this happens, where it's like it's counterintuitive to like completely strip the color away and then show. So like this one works because we're still getting what it's about, and we're getting the sense of what that layer does. But this one, it's it's an enigma. We're like, what is going on? So what we do in this case is actually try and apply it. So I'm going to go back to my showcase, take that bloom and the effects that I've added to it. So I'm just going to copy that across, go back to my assembly, put it on there. So now we can see it better, but even so, I would still say this needs to be on additive or something like that. So we can have the same effect, but now it's like, I guess it is adding, it's better, but it also goes away. Not particularly useful. That depth is not showing up, so this is where we want the depth pass to be visible, remember? So for that we're replacing it with the other depth source. Just need to hold down Option, so there we can see our depth source. And what was this one? This was the mask for our color, which is in a weird space, and we've got it at the bottom. So in this instance, once again, get rid of that, and let's just move to the out point. That's O, by the way, and that's page down, and then that's the square bracket, the in square bracket to snap to that. So here I should see, okay, well, our masks are all the wrong way around again. Try this. No, are they? No, okay. Yeah, our masks are. What we can do, because we want them to mask in instead of masking out the way that they're doing. Let's see what's happening. And guess then what we can do is also just put in, look, this should you could also, of course, just match these layers that are using the masks to the masks above them. So you could also just chop that off, and then go there, endpoint, chop that off. Where that's the emission, I don't know where that mask is, so just gonna make sure that that's back. Chop it off. Guess it's a little bit of comping that needs to happen just to showcase it, which is why jumping between these layers. It's doing exactly the opposite of what I want. So, oh, and I can't just change the endpoint because it's not going to match. I can stretch it like that, or at least the bottom layer. I can change that, but I can't just chop. What? Sorry. 12 frames. Or chop it off, but I can't move this layer, obviously, then they won't match up. Okay, that's the glow on top of that. See, they don't stop now though, but okay. Then that's the depth, and then this is the emission pass. Okay, so that should give you a fairly good result, but you're gonna have to play around with the layers to try and illustrate what these layers or what these passes are actually doing, because this is what you need to explain to the panel of evaluators, that you've split these elements and they do come together eventually to create a coherent image. Okay. So that's my one shot. There's no background, and yours might even be more complicated than this. This is what you want to do for your portfolio, at least. If you can't get to this point for your pre-comps, then the minimum requirement is at least to have a contact sheet, and that's why I said that it works if you go to new composition, make an HD 24 frames per second pre-comp, take your where is it? your contact sheet, and then position your contact sheet. Scale this down so that most of it fits in, probably something like 25% or 50%. You might have to have more than one of these, but there you can show a bunch of layers at the same time. Okay, we rendered a little bit larger, so you can just showcase this. Make sure that they display something though, so that we can actually pick up on it. That emission is really bad. Not much there to look at. Possibly not even really required if it's such a small influence. We could have probably just picked up on this directly and just added glow to that, because I don't think the emission is doing that much, but okay, or the bloom rather. Cool. Right. So that's in a nutshell how you would comp these things in After Effects, and how you showcase the different layers. It's not a one size fits all for every layer, and you're going to have to figure it out for your composition. And that's why you'd get hired as a 3D animator, for being able to do that. Cool. Good luck. I look forward to seeing it. It's of course a formative assessment, so we'll give you feedback. It's a means to the end, so we'll help you sort things out if they don't work properly. Yeah, the aim is mainly to check whether all the required layers are rendering, or will be rendered in the final render, so that we can be sure that the final forms can be comped properly.